Yo, what is up guys, redstagg here with Season 3 around the corner and beta testing out of the way. In today's video, I am bringing you the best starter build for Season 3 of Project Diablo 2. Now, this tier list is built on the following premise, with your skills being around 24 to 26, which is easily achievable with basic spirits, with lore, with items from Anya, and we're benchmarked against each other depending on how well they clear cows, and with consideration of how well they farm the area level 85 that would be suited towards the build. Now, all the testing was done by myself on Twitch live. You can go to my Twitch, that's twitch.tv/redstagg live, if you'd like to see the full VODs and gameplay for each of these builds. So without wasting further time, let's jump into it. Your starter build tier list for Season 3 of Project Diablo 2. See you after the intro. So starting with the D tier, which stands for don't play these unless you have no other feasible option. We have two main builds that stood out as being very poor performing, and that was both the Rabies Druid and the Vengeance Paladin. Starting with Vengeance, it's just weak early game. The dependence on plus skills as well as elemental damage sources, combining that with the fact it's basically an empowered auto attack, you can see why it sits in the D tier. It needs a lot of love early. With Rabies, the playstyle just feels bad. You are squishy, the damage doesn't really make up for it. It just does not compare to any of the other builds that you see in the tiers above it, and therefore also earns its place in D tier. On to the C tier, which stands for could be better or could be much better. We have a number of lightning builds. This is Thunderstorm, this is Chain Lightning Nova, Normal Lightning, and Lightning Traps. We also have two physical range damage dealers in Physical Boa, Throw Barb. We also have the Warcry Barb, the Leap Barb, although it gets a bit of a special mention, as well as the Fart Sin, or known as the Cobra Strike Sin, and Fire Arrow. Lightning builds generally just aren't very good early game. You need that infinity to really feel the power of it and scale much better into the late game, and all other damage types like cold and fire and magic are typically better early. This is true for Lightning Strike, which also has the downside of having to be in melee range, Lightning Sork, all builds, and Lightning Traps from the Assassin. Physical builds are also tricky. At least the range ones make it onto the tier list because they have the safety of being ranged, but the dependence on a good weapon force these to be in C tier. The one exception I could make is for Leap Attack Barb. The reason for this is some exceptional testing has been done by other creators, mentioning Lucky and Macro, showing the power of the Leap Barb in Uber Tristram. But again, until you get that obedience, which you're not necessarily going to have by the time you hit Hell, you're going to have a really tough time, which is why these stay in the C tier. Now, the Warcry Barb, it's been discussed to be a reasonable starter. It was in D tier last season, although it's not really seen too much changes. I do think I was a little tough on it, and it does earn its place in C tier, similar to if it was a Lightsorks Nova. Cobra Strike or Fart Sin, unlike the Phoenix Strike Assassin, doesn't have the crowd control, meaning you need to be much tankier than the Phoenix Strike counterpart, meaning it's no more viable than C tier and definitely under Phoenix Strike Sin, and Fire Arrow is just bad. Trust me. Moving on to the B tier, which stands for builds that are viable if you would like to start with them. We have the Hammerdin, the Lightning Fury Zon, the Phoenix Strike Assassin, Mind Blast Assassin, Wind Druid, Golem Necro, both fire and clay, Bone Necro, as well as Poison Necro, Frost Nova, and Hydra Sork. Hammerdin has seen a bit of love this season, increased projectile speed, for example, including the fact that its damage type is very good for all vanilla content means that it does earn a spot in the B tier. Lightning Fury Zon has also seen some buffs this season, then it got nerfed again, although it's still slightly better than last season. I would also say that it's equivalent probably to the Plague Javazon. They were both able to clear cows roughly at the same pace, And so I would put generally throwing elemental Javazons in the B tier. With Mind Blast Assassin, although it was proving to be quite slow in cows, it was proving rather effective in area level 85 locations, particularly because the damage type has very little immunities in this location. And then also with the Assassin, we have the Phoenix Strike, as I mentioned before, with the CC that it offers compared to Cobra Strike and the multiple damage types, it was also proving to be quite effective in farming area level 85. And with a bit of survivability, could also manage cows. With the Druid, the Wind Druid, the words in the air were that it's very good. I beg to differ. When comparing to the Fire Druid, for example, it just was not up there. It definitely deserves a location just below the Fire Druid, and that is why I place it in the B tier, because Fire Druid was proving to be exceptionally strong. For the Necromancer, as I mentioned before, Clay Golem and Fire Golem were tested. Reasonable clears, pretty safe, slightly different builds in terms of supporting curses, so you could pick one depending on what your team required, and relatively decent at cows and pretty good in area level 85, earning its place in B tier. The Bone Necromancer and the Poison Necromancer are here in B tier, although I only have the Bone icon. Now, Bone was proving to be better than Poison. If I was to be strict about it, I would say it's a B+, and the Poison would be a B-, but because I refuse to do plus and minuses within the tiers, they both landed B tier, able to clear things, but Bone is certainly more effective than Poison. Frost Nova was a bit of a tricky one. It's very nice for, going through the game, but just like the other Novas and like Warcry, you have to be in close proximity to monsters. The reason it hits B tier and not C tier is because it does provide that crowd control that the other Novas don't necessarily, but because your single target damage sucks, it cannot be much higher than B tier for this testing. Hydra, a little bit slow, but it is safe and therefore it stands still in B tier. Moving on to the A tier, which stands for awesome builds for starting. We have many from the Sork, including Meteor, Combustion, Ice Barrage, and Frozen Orb. From the other fire spells, we have the Fire Druid, the Fire Trapsin. From the Necro, we have Dark Pact, Skellymancer, and then finally we have the other summoner, which is the Druid Summoner. Meteor has seen some welcome changes, a bit more erring on the physical side instead of just fire. It was proving it was able to clear cows and is very strong in area level 85 with less concern about immunities, rightfully earning its place in A tier. Combustion, still very strong. With the right positioning, you can one-hit cows, you can one-hit things in the respective area 85 locations. Still a very strong starter, just as it was in Season 1 and 2. Ice Barrage and Frozen Orb, depending on your playstyle, both of these are fairly viable. Cold skills generally are very good to start with. The area level 85 locations are pretty easy to farm. The CC is useful, overall earning their place in A tier. Fire Druid felt really strong. Fisher was proving to decimate cows. With Molten Boulder as well, you're able to keep bosses at a distance, making it a bit more safe than other fire builds, and certainly more safe than Wind Druid, for example. And in area level 85 farming, it was just destroying things. With the Fire Trapsin, although it's seen some nerfs, particularly with Death Sentry, it was still proving to be able to clear cows efficiently and also clear area level 85 efficiently, still earning its place as a top tier build. With Dark Pact, well, it actually blew me away a little bit. The damage is really high. The playstyle, I will admit, isn't for everyone, but because this is scaling with density, you'll very easily find yourself transitioning into mats, rightfully earning its spot in the A tier. Now, with both of the summons, that's the Skellymancer and the Summon Druid, despite the fact that they are a little bit slow due to their absolute easy safety, providing tanks for a team if you're in a team play, they do still earn their spot in the A tier. Finally, moving on to the S tier, which stands for subscribe if you haven't already. No, I'm just kidding. It stands for like super sick starting stuff to play. But do subscribe, I appreciate it. In this tier, we have 4 main builds. Unsurprisingly, 2 of them are cold builds. That's the Cold Zone and the Blizzard Sork. And then surprisingly, the remaining 2 builds are ones we haven't seen in the S tier yet. And those are the Corpse Explosion Neck and the Fists of Heaven / Holy Bolt Paladin. The cold zone was already really strong in Season 2, providing area of effect, crowd control, and now with buffed single target damage, but most importantly, the very easily achievable rune word, Voice of Reason, providing cold pierce. This was just decimating cows, clearing area level 85s with ease, rightfully earning its new spot in the S tier. Moving on to the other cold build, we have the Blizzard Sorceress. I personally was very happy to see the performance of this sort compared to the previous seasons. It was my favorite in vanilla. What can I say? Lots of damage, super safe, crowd control, easily clearing area level 85, easily clearing cows, a great contender for Travinsel for boss running. This, in my opinion, is one of the top S tier builds. Delighted to see it. Now moving on to the final two, Fist of Heavens, we've seen move from very low tier to S tier this season, combining of course with Holy Bolt. But Fist of the Heavens, the new reworks it's had, proves that it has immense damage. It's able to clear things very effectively, and particularly because you have essentially a free aura, depending on your team's requirements, this absolutely earns itself its spot in the S tier. Now the final build in the S tier is the Corpse Explode Necromancer. It has seen many buffs this season, finally making it a viable standalone build. I particularly love the synergy with Revive, meaning you have tanks at the front line. I was able to go in with the same basic gear as all the other testing and immediately go into maps. You have your tanks in the front line, you desecrate for corpses, and you corpse explode until your screen is clear. It was perfect, I really enjoyed it, earning a spot in the S tier. Now that concludes my tier list, which you can now see in full screen. If you want to print screen this, send it to friends for discussion, you're more than welcome, and I'd just like to leave you with some extra tips to make sure you have a good time starting in Season 3. Particularly, Act 3 Mercs are now really viable, very much so with the cold Act 3 Mercs. Blizzard is buffed, Act 3 Mercs cast Blizzard. It's a huge source of crowd control, it also provides a lot of damage, and the icing on the cake is Insight can now be made on Scepters. Remember how the old Act 2 defensive Freezing Aura Mercs were your go-to with Insight when you were starting? Well, now it's Act 3. You get the crowd control from their cold spells, you have the meditation from Insight, and even better, because they're not in melee range, you can expect them to stay alive far more often. Highly recommend that at least one of you in the team has an Act 3 cold merc, and absolutely recommend this for when solo playing. Now, one more point I would like to address, which I'm sure you would have commented otherwise, is the question of, hey, where's Whirlwind? Where's like Wolf Druid? Where's Bear Druid? Where's Zealer Paladin and other melee physical builds? I have reason not to include them. Let me explain. These builds are really dependent on a good weapon and survivability with your armor. Now, I know crafting changes do make this easier, there's no doubt about it, but I went through the whole of Season 2 crafting lots of weapons and ended up with nothing good. Who's to say that by the time you hit hell, you're going to have something different than I had my whole season? For this reason, I just couldn't include these physical builds as a starter pick. Now, that does not mean that they're bad, it just means I would recommend another build until you're sure you have both survivability and good damage. As I said before, the honorable mention is the Leap Attack Barb, because we have seen the power of it already with other testers trying it out in Ubers. But again, as I mentioned before, until you get obedience, it's just going to be a tough time. Now, I hope this tier list gave you a good idea of what you're going to start. If you want to know what I'm going to start, I will be starting Amazon. It's my favorite character, always has been. And I will likely be starting Cold Zone or Java Zone. I'm really keen to hear if this tier list has changed your mind and what you're going to start with in Season 3. So let me know in the comments. Final note, best of luck in Season 3 of Domination. I look forward to playing with you in the future. Redstagg out. Peace.